Hey guys, so here I have my 7-inch long-range FPV drone, and today I'll show you step by step how to build this lovely quadcopter. So let's start with a quick overview of the parts that I'll be using in this project. The total cost me about 300 bucks. There are some ways to get it about 100 bucks cheaper. I'll put a link in the description for all these parts and also the cheaper alternatives. Let's get started. So this is the Mark IV China frame copy. I'll give more detailed reviews on each part later in the video, but this is just a quick overview. Then I'll use the Emax Eco II 2807 1300 kV. This is a 6S build, so low kV, great. The SpeedyBee F405 V3 50 amp stack for 3 to 6 LIBO. Then a cheap Chinese camera, pretty good output quality. I already tested this before. The Eachine TX805s with 1600 milliwatts output power and smart audio. For my Frsky R9 module, this Frsky R9mm receiver. Then the GPS, the Foxeer M10Q 250. I'll unbox this later. TPU parts for the antenna mounts and just for building a small VTX antenna. So let's start assembling the frame with these parts. This side, take away, we don't need these. So let's get into the frame. So this is the finished frame. I didn't put all the top screws in there because I still have to take this apart and put all the electronics in. So let's go on with the flight controller. So the flight controller that I'll be using is the SpeedyBee 405 V3. I already used this in a previous build. That's why I got the connectors already soldered on. So. Screws for mounting. Another set of screws. VTX cable and the connection cable between the ESC and the flight controller. So let's mount the flight controller stack in the frame. Therefore we have to take off the top part, so we have free access to these holes where the ESC and the FC is going to be mounted. Here we have a small problem because the mountings for the arms are much higher than the inside, and if we were to put the ESC directly in there, if we pressed it down to the bottom, we would damage the cables because they would rip open on this sharp edge here. So what we're gonna do is we will put some spacers in between this carbon plate and the FC, so that it stands a little bit off and the cables won't hit this carbon plate. So therefore we take the longer screws that were delivered with the flight controller, but we can't just put them in there direct because they would be higher than the top plate, which wouldn't work out. So we take one of these spacers. These are just normal spacers. You can use anything like them as long as they have roughly the same height and they fix in your frame. So we put one spacer on the screw. So now the screw is lower than the top carbon plate. And put down, or you can hold it with your finger, and you just repeat this for all four. If you mount the flight controller, always watch out for this arrow. This has to be in the flight direction. So this front, the arrow has to point to the front. So next we are going to get into the motors. So these are the motors. As I already said, the Emax Eco II 2807 1300 kV. These are the motors. They look pretty good, much better than these cheap Chinese ones. Nice glossy finish. And what's great about these, they come with some spare parts. Of course, the top nut for the propeller, but here is a little replacement screw for this one at the bottom, because if you have to take the motor apart because the bell got damaged, you always have one screw as a replacement. So when you're finished, your drone should be looking something like this. This arm is blue because I ran out of black shrink wires. So I already pre-cut. Please focus here. I already pre-cut these motor wires. They are much longer for stock. So and by the way, you do it if you have already mounted the motors like this, and then you just take the first wire. It doesn't matter which wire goes to which pin here. You just take one wire, put it to the pin, and then cut it to the right length, and then you re-isolate just like 2 to 3 millimeters of the wire and put a little bit of soldering iron on it. So let's solder the motors to the EC. Therefore we take off the flight controller on the top, so we have easier access to the EC and don't risk burn or damage to the flight controller. So now we're ready to solder. If you have a soldering station where you can change the temperature, I would always recommend to solder, if you know how to solder, at higher temperatures, but only for a short time. So you just, like, if you were to solder with 340 degrees, you would have to hold the soldering iron down much longer, and therefore the chip would get much warmer. But if you switch the temperature to, for example, like me now, 390 degrees, you will only have to tip it very short. Everything is melted, but the ESC didn't get that hot. So we start with these small wires out here on the side. And then you have a perfectly soldered FPV drone. Always make sure that in between those wires there are no shortcuts, so the soldering points don't touch each other. Yeah, let's put the FC back on. So in the next step, we're gonna install the GPS. It comes with this extra long connection cable, which is quite good for us because I'm mounting it in the back of the drone. The cables have to go to the FC. So this is the Foxeer M10Q 250. Got everything you need on it, with a compass too and a gyroscope. So let's mount it here in this TPU mount. Don't wonder why this looks so ugly. For this specific drone you can't find something like this online, so I printed it myself. And because TPU is very likely to rip apart in between those 3D printing layers, I melted the whole surface with a lighter, and now it's super durable. It's like one block of injection molded plastic, still flexible. So there you have it. I will put a zip tie around this to keep it safe, but it won't fall out right now either. So let's put in the connector. So now that we mounted our GPS, here will be the VTX antenna and the RX antenna. First, we gotta install the VTX in the drone. So here we have the TX805s from Eachine. Already said 600 milliwatt output power maximum. Pretty powerful, especially for long range necessary. Then it's pretty smart audio. So what comes in the box? We have instruction with all the race bands and the different voltages. Don't need that. And then we have here the lovely VTX. As you can see, smart audio, 5 volts, ground, the video input, and here 5 volts and ground are for the camera, and the ground and the volt input are here. So this thing receives electricity by itself and then could provide it to the camera, but we won't need that because in between this VTX and the camera will be the flight controller, which gives power to the components itself. So we will cut off these 2 middle wires. Power switching button, connector, and we have here we have the connector, which will be mounted through this hole, or if we want to use this bipole linear antenna for testing, we can put it in, but this doesn't give us very long range, so I won't use this. We now have to mount this VTX in the drone. I will put it back here. There are these holes, and I will just mount it on the first 2 ones right here, like so, just below the power lines. And then the cables, of course, will go down under here. On it, I will use these mini screws and these 2 nuts. I just bought myself one of these screw kits from Amazon. Really cheap, but you will always have some place where you are happy to have it and you can use it. Our VTX is mounted down here, nice stiff. I fixed down the capacitor with a zip tie so it doesn't move around in here. Always be careful, don't rip out these connection pins or you will have to buy a new capacitor. If you're lucky otherwise and you don't recognize these pins are ripped off, your ESC is going to blow up mid-air. So always be careful with the capacitor. Now that we have mounted the VTX, we can mount the antenna connector to our TPU antenna holder part. Don't know how to call this, but we just put the antenna in from behind. It's very tight, but it fits perfectly. I gotta pull this out a little bit more, like so. Perfect fit. So now we have our antenna adapter mounted. Always make sure that the screw part here is long enough to actually get the antenna fully screwed on. Like in my case here, it's very close. I just have 0.5 millimeter left, but the antenna is nice and tight. So after a bit of trying, I just gave up and flipped the VTX around 90 degrees because this antenna mount here just couldn't match up with the antenna adapter right here. It was just too long and won't fit in there, so I turned it around 90 degrees. Now everything fits perfectly. All cables come out down below. They will go right in the middle here to the FC, but first we're gonna mount the RX, the receiver for our radio. So to mount the RX, you first have to pop in the antenna and the antenna mount, so you know how long the cable is gonna be and where you can reach with your receiver. I will later secure the antenna with some zip ties. First, we are going to figure out where we want to put this. I'll put it down. And I think we could just, if we're careful, we could put the wires through here and then pull the X there, and then we're gonna mount it right here, just like this. Perfect. So as we finished installing the RX right here on the bottom, I just used double-sided tape to hold it in place there. It's very light, you don't need a stronger solution. So the last part is our camera. I will do a quick unboxing. This is just a very cheap camera from Amazon. It comes with, get out of the box, got the screws. It first the camera. Here we have it. It's just a basic one. Yeah, come on. Yes. I used this in a previous project, and I have to say that the output quality of this is very great. I have on my 5-inch race quad, I have the Cadex Vista, and this one for about 15 bucks is nearly the same quality as a $60 camera, so you don't need anything really expensive. So now that there's everything fit in our quad as we wanted, we have the flight controller with the ESC, we have the motors on the arms, motors already soldered to the ESC, we have the camera with the VTX, the radio receiver, and the GPS, also antenna, and the RX antenna. The last step is to solder all these wires from the GPS, the VTX, the RX, and the camera to the flight controller. And then when you have soldered on all wires, always double check if you connected them to the right pin on the flight controller. You can finally screw on the top plate. And there you have it, your finished 7-inch long-range FPV drone. In the next part, I will show you how to set up the flight controller and how to configure the GPS and make your quad ready to fly. So, see you guys next time. So guys, in the end, a small teaser, because in my opinion there will be coming a few very cool projects on my channel, like building a cinewhoop adapter for my 5-inch freestyle drone, which you can click on and then you can fly this as a cinewhoop indoors. Then I will build a camera gimbal for this drone, so you can do like aerial photography with a GoPro. And I will show you how I build a long-range ground station to get like the maximum range out of my drones. So stay tuned.